Despite the fact that in the last several videos we've done some practice with actually reading data from a file, specifically the color data that we've been experimenting with, I actually wanted to go through the process one more time here in this particular example. What I have here so far is an HTML file, essentially the structure of an HTML document that I've created as a PHP file, of course. If I actually look at it in the browser, this is the way that it actually appears right now. And what I would like to do with this page, like the last few examples we've done, is I would like to read all of our color data from our file and display it as a table. This time though, in my file, I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I had done it previously. What I'm going to start with is I'm going to put in a PHP block up at the top of my document, and inside that PHP block is where I want to actually go through the process of reading the data from my file. Let's go ahead and start up here by opening our file. I'll use the fopen function like we've done previously. Based on where this particular file is stored, my color file should be one level up, so I'm going to do /colors.txt. And I'm going to open the file in read mode. That will then give me my file handle back, which I'll then be able to use as I continue reading my file. I am going to want to go through and read the entire file, so I'm going to have a for loop that will take me through and let me do that. Before I actually go into the while loop though, it's probably a good idea if I check and make sure that my file actually is open. So let me start an if statement. If I actually do have my file, then that's when I'm actually going to want to go read from it. So I'll move my while loop inside my if there. Inside the while loop, I'm going to want to read to the end of my file. So I'm going to say while we're not at the end of the file. Right? So as long as that condition is met or isn't met because of the not, if you want to think of it that way, we will continue reading from the file. And I think I'm going to use the fgetcsv function to do my reading, since of the different functions I've learned so far, that one is by far the easiest. So I'm going to use fgetcsv to read from my file, maximum line length of 999 characters, and my file is delimited with a tab. Every time I call that, that will then give me back a set of fields, which I'll then be able to work with. In this particular case, what I'm going to want to do with those fields is I am going to want to store them temporarily. I'm thinking in an array, so that I'll then have that array available so that I can then use it down in the body when I'm ready to actually display or to work with that data in some way. So back up here at the top of my block, let me create a new array. I'm going to call it colors. There we are. And in my colors array is where I'm going to actually want to store all of these different values. So let me go ahead and say if the count of the fields, right, the number of fields that were read from a line, if it's greater than 1, so essentially if the line wasn't blank is what I'm saying, then push into that array called colors this particular set of fields. What I'll actually end up with at that point as a result of that array push is a two-dimensional array. Colors itself is an array, kind of the overall master array if you want to think of it that way, and stored inside the colors array as each of its values I have subarrays. Each of these subarrays that I'm referring to here as fields contains the actual data for the colors themselves. So a two-dimensional array, an array of arrays, is what I'm actually ending up with here. By the time this basic process is done, I should have extracted and parsed all of the data from my colors file and stored it away there in that colors array so that I could then take that colors array and make use of it down in the body. So let me jump back down here into the main content area. And what I want to do down here for starters is I want to create a table. I'm going to give it a class of colors. That's for some CSS that will come later. I'm going to go ahead and create a first table row and put some headers in it. What I'm going to want to display is I'm going to want to display the color's name. I'm going to want to display the color's value, the hex value that we have stored in our file. And then I'm going to put in a couple of other headers because there's going to be a few extra columns that I'm going to put in my table that I'll explain here in a minute. So those two blank table headers are simply there to balance the table out, essentially, to make sure that my header row here will have the same number of columns or fields or cells in it as all of the following rows will. All the following rows will also have 4 cells in them. Okay, now when it comes time to actually fill in the data in the rest of the table from my array, let me start by putting in a set of PHP tags, and inside these PHP tags, how about I do a for each loop? I'll say for each of the values in the colors array, taking each one as fields. I'm going to use the alternate syntax here. I'll say end for each to end that loop. So for each one of those colors, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new row. And inside that row, what I want to do is I want to put in all 4 pieces of data. Except I don't want to put them in sort of in the format they are in the file. In the file, my data is split up into, as I recall, 4 separate rows. I'm sorry, 4 separate columns. There was the name, the red value, the green value, and the blue value. What I want to do here is I want the name to be on its own, but I want the red, green, and blue value to all sort of be lumped together into that second column, and then the third and fourth columns are going to be for something else. So I can't really use another for each loop here. What I'll need to do is just extract each one of the values from my fields array that the for each loop here is giving me. I'll have to pull each one of the values out of that individually. So let me make a table cell, a TD, for the color's name, and inside that one I will echo from the fields array element 0, which is where the name should be. For the second column of the table, I'm going to echo out, and this is where I want the actual fields, or the actual color value, which is actually red, green, and blue values put together. So those are in fields 1, 2, and 3. So let me do fields 1, and then I'll append to that fields 2, and then I'll append to that fields 3, so that I end up with all 3 of those values displayed back to back in that particular column. The other 2 columns here I'm just going to leave blank for the moment. Let's just go in and see if we are getting the basic data that we want to have displayed in our table. I'm going to jump back over to my browser. Let me hit refresh there. And it looks like I messed something up back up on line 6, F-E-O-F. Yep, I swapped a couple letters there, didn't I? So back up to the top, F-O-E-F should be F-E-O-F. There we are. And now that I think about it, I also forgot to actually close my file, didn't I? So let me go ahead and throw an F-close in there as well. When you're reading from data, the close doesn't matter so much, but it certainly won't hurt anything to have it there. Now back over to the browser again, refresh. There we go. So I'm getting the names of all my colors displayed, and the actual color values look like they're coming out fine. And then I have 2 extra columns there to fill in with some other bits and pieces that I want to put with them. Just a few other little changes that I might want to make down here to my table, as I might need them for my CSS. The field that has the name in it, I'm going to set a class for it of name. The field that has the value in it, I'm going to give it a class of color. All right, the next 2 fields I'm actually going to give classes of edit and destroy, which will give you a little bit of a hint of what I plan on doing with those. All right, so that is the basic idea. And just to jazz things up a little bit, here on my actual color field, let me go ahead and actually make the background color of that field the background color itself. So I'm going to do a little bit of inline CSS right here, setting a background color, essentially like this. And I need to insert the color itself right there. The color itself right there, of course, is stored in PHP, so I'm going to need some PHP tags there. And then I generally need the exact same thing that I have over here. Instead of repeating that code, though, I think maybe what I'll do instead is how about I take this little segment of code where I'm appending field 1, 2, and 3 to generate the actual color code itself. Maybe I'll put it just here inside this loop. Let me say code equals that, and that way down here inside each of these 2 sets of PHP tags I can just say echo the code. Echo the code there, echo the code there. There we are. Let's see how that looks in the browser. There we go, and I'm getting my actual colors. Not entirely unpleasing, really. But there we go, that's a pretty decent start for what I'm looking for. I suppose the next thing to talk about is why have I gone through and again taken us through the process of reading our color data from the file. We've done this before several different times, several different ways. We did it reading individual characters. We've done it previously with fgetcsv. Here I've used fgetcsv again, although I did use it in a slightly different way than we used it previously, building up my 2-dimensional array instead of extracting the data and using it directly in the body of my document. But still, why did I bother? Well, because essentially, with everything we've learned up to this point, with this new addition of being able to write data to files and then read the data back from the files again, we have a new option for a type of application that we can create in PHP. This new type of application is sort of generally referred to as CRUD, C-R-U-D. Yep, you heard me, CRUD. CRUD here, I'm not referring to the poor quality of our code. What CRUD actually refers to in this context, the letters CRUD stand for Create, Read, update and delete. So C for create, R for read, U for update, and D for delete. Essentially what this refers to is a basic process, a basic system that gets built into most all applications that have any kind of data persistence. So just about any kind of application, whether it's a desktop application or a web application, like for example one we might write with PHP, if that application has as part of its functionality the ability to store and work with data, CRUD will probably be necessary. Essentially meaning that any kind of data an application works with, you're probably going to need to build into your application the ability to create data, to be able to read that data, to be able to update that data, and then at some point in the future to be able to delete that data. As a matter of fact, you could say that essentially what we've done here with this particular application is we have created a way for us to be able to read our color data. It's certainly possible that we might want to give ourselves other ways to also be able to read this color data, but creating an index page, a general reading listing page like we've done here, is part of the R in CRUD, part of the ability to be able to read. What I'd like to do in the next handful of videos is I'd like to cover the other three letters. I would like to be able to create new colors, which we've actually also already done a part of when we created our new page a few videos back. We can actually go back and just sort of work that new page here into this system that I've started with this example. And then we'll need to also look at the ability to be able to maybe show data in detail instead of just as a general list like we're doing here. We'll need to add a page that would let us update our data, and we will need to add a page that will let us delete our data, which, like I alluded to before, probably gives away what these extra two columns are for. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and throw some of this in. A few changes that I want to make to what I have here. One of the things is here in this empty edit cell that I have at the moment, what I'd actually like to do is I'm going to put in a span, and inside that span I'm going to put in a hyperlink. And what this hyperlink is going to become is it's going to be a hyperlink that the user will click to indicate that they want to edit this that particular color. I don't know that page quite yet. I haven't created it. I don't know exactly what I'm going to call it, although I'd say edit is a pretty good guess. But for right now, what I'm going to do with that hyperlink is I'm just going to set it to go to #edit, which basically just means edit on the current page. It doesn't really go anywhere, but that'll be a good placeholder until I know exactly where I want to put it. Same basic idea down here for destroy then. I'm going to put in a span, and inside that span I'm going to put in a hyperlink. For that hyperlink, just as a temporary placeholder, I'm going to set its URL to destroy. Did I spell that wrong? There we go. Destroy, that should be right. That ought to take care of it. All right, and one last hyperlink I want to throw in here, and that's that the actual color code itself right here, whenever the user clicks on the actual color code itself, I would like for that to be a hyperlink. So let me go ahead and set that one up again with a little temporary URL in there. I'll set it up essentially like that. So that will be the link where the user can click on the color, and that will take them to a page to more closely examine just that one individual color, sort of a detail page if you want to think of it that way. All right, with all of that extra added, let me just peek at it in the browser here real quick. Over in the browser, I hit refresh. It fills in my what I'll call my show links, my edit links, and my destroy links, which presently don't actually go anywhere. Over here in the corner of my application, I already have a link that's set up that brings me back to this page, and a link that will take me to the new page when I get that created. So that's all in place. The only other thing maybe this needs is a little bit of CSS. I actually already have a CSS style sheet that I created for this little mini project. Let me go ahead and drop that in. If I hop back over to the browser now and look at it with my extra CSS, this is the way it now actually appears. It looks like I left out a class name, so I'm getting the header row showing up there, but essentially I have it set where all my other colors show up as colored boxes where the person can see the code, see the name, all that real well. And whenever you hover over it, we should have edit and destroy links that show up. It looks like I still need a little bit of CSS work right there. Let me jump back over to my document and fix that stuff up real quick. There we are with those few changes made. Let me go ahead and refresh in the browser and see if that fixes everything up. There we go. The blank disappeared there at the beginning, and if I hover now, I get my proper links the way I had intended them. This will be my destroy link. This will be my edit link, information about the color, edit, I don't know, I couldn't think of anything better. But that's essentially the point we'll be moving forward from. Here with our first page set up for a CRUD application, we will go on and work on building our other pages and getting the rest of this little color system set up for ourselves.